All right, we're going to get started here. Welcome to the Connected On-Demand Workplace webinar. My name is Ari Kepnes, and I am Director of Market Research at Density. And I am joined by Brian. Brian is the Head of Product and the co-founder at Density. We'll talk a little about what is Density and the agenda in just a moment here. So we're going to introduce Density to you, talk about this idea of the connected on-demand platform that is taking a hold of not just the workplace, but it's pervasive across mobile applications, and it's an overall trend that we need to understand. And then we'll talk about what that means for the workplace and accept your questions. Two quick notes. At the bottom of your screen or at the top, you should see a folder that has a Q on it. It says Q+A. Please insert your questions there. You can do so anonymously, but we do encourage you to leave your name if you feel comfortable with that. But either way, leave a question. And secondly, everyone who joins and stays through the remainder of the webinar and meets the requirements that we sent will be getting a $20 gift card to Amazon. So thanks again for your time. We know it's valuable, and we really appreciate it. So thanks for sticking with us for this webinar today. So we are Density. Density is an analytics platform for the connected workplace, and we're able to collect data using an anonymous people counting device that we build ourselves in the hardware as well as the software. The way that we are differentiated in the space is that our solution has industry-leading accuracy, as well as different ways of reporting on how many people are in a space at any given time, and real-time analytics. So we'll talk about how that platform kind of integrates into all the different solutions we're going to be talking about today. But at a high level, one thing to note is that we are basically providing to our customers, which happen to be Fortune 500 companies with some of the largest corporate real estate, a way of understanding utilization in real time and over time across their portfolio with these devices that they're able to put across every room, building, and floor. And with that analytics, they're able to make great decisions with data for both their overall portfolio as well as empower their employees to do so. So we're going to get started here with this concept of what we want when we want it. So if you think about the connected on-demand platforms of today, you look at Uber, Lyft, WeWork, all of these different companies today, they all have something in common, which is they're all really shifting towards giving people what they want when they want it, sacrificing traditional ownership for access to the things that they need at that given moment. And this is kind of an interesting trend, and I put WeWork there on purpose because WeWork is an actual really interesting way of thinking about having people sacrifice the idea of ownership and their own defined offices, their own space, in a compromise for getting access to what they need when they need it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But they're important to put into this context because a lot of the fastest growing marketplaces today are based on this concept, meaning I can get what I want when I want it. And I can do that through some sort of a connected platform. So with that context, we want to look at this way that it's transferring into the workplace. So when we think about this concept of flexibility, that is something that the biggest kind of industry leaders, JLL, they're defining the next wave of workplaces with this word, this flexibility, flexible. And what they mean is that people are going to be shifting to co-working spaces. They're going to have shorter term leases. The whole idea of the workplace is becoming more flexible. And they think that it's going to take, for example, 30% of all office space will be somewhat flexible. So we're seeing the shift for long-term leases, static design, and these fixed mindset into something that's a little bit more iterative and a little bit more flexible. Now that does sound abstract, so we'll break that down a little bit more. And interestingly, CBRE is using the same word. Their word is agility, but they also use flexible. And their idea here is that the workplace strategy needs to be more agile. It needs to be inherently flexible, and it has to be supported by technology. And so the whole central idea here is if you do put the employee experience at the center to give them what they want when they want it, you need to be able to iterate. You need to be able to use technology. You need to be able to be flexible to their needs in a shorter period of time, sometimes on demand. So that is the context for a lot of the changes that we're seeing. It's a different time frame. It's a different level of access to the things that people need. And when we kind of summarize what this means on any given platform, we can do so with these kind of concepts. The first is more choice. So you need to be able to have more access to a wide array of things that you didn't have before. And then you also need to do, in order to do that, you have better service in less time. So let's take Uber as an example. In Uber, you can go anywhere. You can pick what kind of car, how big it is. You can do so at the touch of a button from your mobile device, and you have better service than you would otherwise. And you are sacrificing your own ownership, your own autonomy in some ways for service. And it's this hospitality mindset that's creeped into all of these platforms. And you're doing so with this concept of I can get what I want in less time. So what I think is really fascinating about all of these systems, they're really about supply and demand that's flexible and is responding to the user, making their lives easier with mobile technology. So that's a pretty abstract idea when we think about the employee experience at work. What this actually means is that you want to create an environment that's tunable to those employees, that gives them the choices that they want, that has a service mentality of kind of hospitality, and it does so in less time. So those are the ways that we can really articulate and think through the workplace changes of today. Once the employee is at the center, you're going to have these type of shifts in terms of choice, service, and time. And on the right here, this is a look at our analytics, which we'll get to in just 1 second here. But there's a way that this all needs to be driven by data, because you need to have some sort of a feedback loop between people in the spaces that they need if you want to provide them with these optimal experiences. And so to begin here, we're going to kind of walk through this as it relates to some integrations that Brian is going to share with us. So Brian, you want to just tee up this conversation here around Slack and all the integrations we offer? That would be great.
Sure, thanks, Ari. Yeah, so let's put this in context of the employee. As Ari mentioned, one of the big frustrations employees have is not having access to the space they need when they need it. Gartner put out a survey recently, and they found that the average employee spends about an hour every week just looking for an open space, open room. We conducted our own survey, and we found a very similar finding. And personally, I can attest to this problem. I work out of our New York City office. I'm actually calling in from there right now. And before we installed density at the office, I was going up and down between 5 different floors just trying to find an open room. And we've spoken to customers at Fortune 500 companies, and they have this exact same problem at their corporate campus. So let's jump into the demo. We're going to showcase how this happens and how we're attempting to solve for it. So we're in Slack, a tool we use for interoffice communication. I'm going to send Ari a message. Hey, Ari, can we review the latest release of the dashboard? So we'll wait for Ari to respond. Cool. So sure, let's find a room. So at this point, usually I would go hunt around for a room. But instead, we have the density bot. And we can say, hey, density, show me free conference rooms nearby. And so density will go out to our API, look for different rooms that are nearby, and find the count in each room. So you can see that the Coconut Lounge has 0 people. The SF Large Conference Room, Hopper, also has 0 people, but it's booked right now for an event called the Product Sync. And then the SF Double Phone Booth has 2 people in it. So I'm going to book Ari, actually, you can book the Coconut Lounge for us for 15 minutes. Cool. And so this integration with Slack and our calendaring software makes it super easy to focus on what we need to get done, and we don't have to waste time looking for an open room. And this data becomes even more powerful when you compare historical booking data with foot traffic data that we collect. So here's an example of our dashboard. And this is comparing foot traffic data with room booking data from Google Calendar. And if you look at the different reports, they all have different calls to action. But if we just focus on the top left one for a moment, what you can see is from March 24th to April 4th, 16% of meetings went unattended. So we had a number of different meetings, and 5 of those meetings were booked, but this conference room, was never attended. So that's just some of the analytics you can get by using density and connecting it to room booking data. So if we come back to the employee and we fast forward to lunchtime, we can think a little bit about how to find out the real-time busyness of a space. And we offer Density Mobile. So Ari's gonna play this little movie. So this is our mobile app. And essentially what we have is a list of spaces. And in the list of spaces that you'll see in momentarily, you see the real-time count, you see the capacity, and you have the ability to star your favorite spot. So I go to the cafeteria often, so I've starred that as my favorite. So we'll jump into the cafeteria, and you can see that the real-time count is 121 people right now. And we have this really cool chart on the bottom that shows forecasting what the foot traffic will be like in the future. So if I scroll through here, you can see later in the day at 2 p.m., we predict based on historical data that there will be 37 people in the cafeteria. And we also make it really easy to be notified when it's quiet. You just flip a toggle, and now we'll send you a push notification when the capacity of the space comes down to a level in which you won't have to wait in line to get food. And this makes it really easy to not waste time and immediately go to the cafeteria and get your food. So Ari, I'm gonna throw it back to you, and you can talk a little bit more about the data platform and integrations.
Sure. So I think just to put some context around it, that the overall idea that you need to have a good experience by accessing what you want when you want it goes into the little moments throughout your day that can either be seamless or a real time suck and a real inconvenience. So in that context that Brian and I just demoed here, it's really about lifting some of those ways of going through an office throughout your day, whether it's looking for a conference room, which is a huge problem from people in terms of finding an open space, to finding a cafeteria closest to you that's going to be actually not have too many people in it, that you're not waiting in line. So those things seem maybe small, but at a large scale, they really show this promise of an on-demand connected workplace. And they show that if you want to be focusing on the employee and the employee experience, you have to lift the barriers. You have to lift the tension across the different user journeys that they go through, the different experiences they go throughout the day, whether that's conference rooms, amenities, which by the way are a huge emphasis in today's corporate real estate, or just getting their work done and finding the space to do it. So if we want to summarize this concept of rising expectations for experience, what we can think about is this idea that throughout all of the design of the workplace, having these 3 tenets in mind of more choice and less time with better service sinks in to the overall experience at work, whether it's finding a space that's open, right? And having choice to a variety of spaces like Brian and I did at that moment in less time, whether it's having a designated ownership over a space or access to the spaces that you need when you need it. And that's why we're seeing a huge shift to unassigned space, by the way. That's also a part of this, right? And then better service, there really is this hospitality mindset. We went to NeoCon, which was one of the largest furniture manufacturing showcases for workplaces. And the big theme for Knoll, one of the largest furniture manufacturers, was hospitality at work. And I think that really gets into how to think about and how to approach this context. And so the reason why I'm kind of simplifying it into these 3 buckets, whether we're talking about something like room booking, or whether we're talking about something like the cafeteria and amenities, or even planning the spaces based on their performance, it's really taking these 3 attributes in mind. Do you allow for more choice and less time with better service? And if you could do that, that is the components of an employee experience. So I want to kind of go into, now that we've painted a picture of what can be done, what's possible, to how we actually collect this data. So the way that we approach this and in our perspective is that in order to do any of this kind of system, any of the optimizations for the employee experience, you have to put the employee at the center, and you have to be able to understand how are people interacting with a physical space. But accurately counting people in real time is a pretty difficult problem. Humans do things like they hide behind hinges in a doorway. They walk in different directions, right? When we go to a conference room, we camp out right outside it before we walk in. They carry different objects. That's on the right. That's a whiteboard there. And so you can see that just this basic feedback loop between people and the environment that they are in is a complicated problem. And so our approach to it is one that we want to understand with a great deal of accuracy, with an industry-leading accuracy. Is there a human in the room? How many people are there? And so our approach to this is to use depth data. Depth data in the sense of topographical data, depth. 3D. And on the left here, and how it may look like a heat map to some of you, but it is actually a depth data where the red is closer and the blue is farther away. And you can see that with great deal of accuracy, that trigger line, as people are walking in and out, we are able to discern that there are two people who have left the room. So this looks very kind of different than a regular optical device, and that is by design. So it is not a camera. It is only taking these topographical, these depth readings, and able to discern what is a human versus a non-human object. As you can see on the right, everything that is not a human object is not counted. On that note, too, we do have this advantage of being anonymous because we are not an optical sensor. We're not a camera. We're able to be installed anywhere across a workplace and still measure how many people are in each of these spaces. So that brings us to just at a high level, how we do it is we install these devices above every entryway, above defined spaces. And we do so with PoE, or through just plugging into a regular power outlet and connecting over Wi-Fi. And once you do that, once you put these devices with density, you're able to get that accurate data. You're able to provide this feedback loop in real time between people and the spaces that they are in. So thank you so much for your time here. We are going to take some questions. And we hope that even if you don't have questions right now, that you continue the conversation with us, whether it's to find out about using density to assist with some of your own initiatives or specifically about our product. Please reach out. You can reach out to us or take an email to sales@density. So some of these questions here are around, we have how much data is required to build forecasts for when it's quiet? Okay, so that's a great question. So when you know how many people are using a space, you can also do things like predict how many people will be at a certain space at a certain time. So we actually have, for the cafeteria that Brian mentioned, we have a number of clients who are actually basing how much food they order, how many people they staff, how they think about their whole cafeteria and facilities management, even across their campus, not just with the cafeteria. And in order to do that, we build them forecasts for when it's going to be quiet or when it will be, how many people will be there over a series of time. And so in order to do that, we do have these devices installed, and we have them typically installed for a period of at least 6 months. And then you are able to collect some of this predictive data. But you're also able to understand in real time, when will it drop for the employee. Employee can pick up their phone and see, when will the space quiet down and get alerted in real time. And that's where the real-time integrations come in. And then the second question here is around Slack integration. So Brian mentioned Slack. There's a number of different integrations that we do support, from Robin, Team, Comfy, whatever kind of workplace technology that you guys use at your workplace, we can integrate into most likely. And that does require that first you install the density devices, And then you can integrate it with any of these systems to optimize for panes like meeting rooms or overall attendance. Okay, and then there's a question for you, Brian. Go ahead.
I was just going to go back to the forecast real quick. One of the things that's really interesting about forecast data is that it's not only just the foot traffic data that we're using as a dimension in building forecasts and predictive models. We're working with some retail stores, and weather and even the traffic outside will give a drastic change to that day's foot traffic. So we're pulling a number of different dimensions to build the best predictive model possible. And we can also start modeling a cafeteria based on other cafeterias we've seen before. So you might not have to wait weeks to get forecast data. We could say, hey, this cafeteria looks like similar cafeterias in this area that have this size capacity, and we can start giving somewhat accurate predictive data. It gets better over time, obviously, with more historical data we ingest. So just want to make a note of that. And Ari, did you want me to answer the Outlook question?
Yeah, so there's an Outlook question. We also have a scalability question. So if you want to take that, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so the question is, we use Outlook. I see many rooms that I could book. Will Density hook into our Outlook rooms? And yes, right now we support Robin, Team, and Google Calendar. In the near future, we're going to be supporting Outlook and EMS, Condeco, and a number of other types of calendaring systems. So right now, it's mostly Robin, Team, and Google, but in the next few weeks, we'll have support for those other systems. The next question I see is, what is the scalability of the backend? Can it handle a customer estate that has 400 meeting rooms? And yes, we're pretty much set up for that type of scale. To be honest, the scale that ends up being heavy on our servers is actually foot traffic in locations like cafeterias or lounges, where there's a lot of events going in and out. Typically, meeting rooms don't have as much foot traffic, so we actually it's not even a blip on our radar. So handling 400 meeting rooms really shouldn't be a problem at all.
Yeah. So a couple notes here. Number one is, I think that, if I were to be listening to this for the first time, I could assume that maybe it feels overwhelming. And, to compare your office to something like an Uber or even a WeWork in 2019, when we're just beginning to understand how people are using physical space with accurate data, may seem overwhelming and far away. But what I will say is what I've been personally kind of amazed by, but also impressed by in working with different clients, is that for the largest challenges that they have, whether it is providing a workplace experience or justifying their decisions with data in terms of what amenities or number of conference rooms, or justifying things like different technologies, at a very basic level, it does start with, well, how many people are using this specific resource? How many people are using this space? And let's start from there. And so if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like this is not something that you relate to and that you're kind of on the crawl, walk, run spectrum, then we especially want to talk to you, because there's so many easy wins that you can get that are just from understanding how many people are in the space. You can justify the allocation of space. You can change the design. You can even prove to your CFO, in many instances, the decision that you already want to make. And so it just starts from understanding of how are people interacting with the physical space. And this is kind of, the 3.0 of that. To that note, we do have a space utilization webinar coming up. So if you're interested in that is more on the initial part of all of this. Another question here we have, our last one, is, do you provide installation as something that you need to handle? So we have been able to successfully install with some of the largest corporate real estate at Fortune 500 clients across telecom, across technology, and even in finance. And they have very strict procedures as to who and how different things get installed in their spaces. So we've worked with the partners that they usually work with for installation, but or we do have our own way of working with our own partners to install. If this is something that you're considering and you're feeling like, oh no, like how do I go about installing this across my portfolio? And you want to know if we're right for you in that way, like just please reach out, because it has not been a problem installing or getting past InfoSec. All of the major hurdles that could go into technology are ones that we've been proud to be able to get around and to ultimately provide value to our customers. So on that end, I want to thank you for your time. Again, I want to just remind you that in this weird world, which is workplace, as things are changing so rapidly and things are moving from just a resource allocation and high-level decision to the real workplace experience and focusing on the user in new ways, we want to be a partner to help you do that, and we want to do it in a way that's going to help you provide your employees with the best workplace. So please reach out. We really want to talk to you. We really thank you for your time today, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.